In the previous video, we went through the basic structure of a draft climate change response plan and how you can go about drafting your own climate change response plan. This video will take you through the stakeholder engagement process, which is the next crucial step in the development of your plan, as it ensures that the right people participate and provide input into your climate change planning process. So firstly, why do we need to engage with stakeholders? To start with, it's important to remember that South Africa's constitution has a very strong focus on involving stakeholders in the matters of local government. To quote from section 152, the objectives of local government are to encourage the involvement of communities as well as community organizations in the matters of local government. Consultation is also the very first of the 8 Batupele principles that aim at improving service delivery by putting people first. The consultation principle states, citizens should be consulted about the level and quality of the public services they receive, and wherever possible, should be given a choice about the services that they are offered. Besides these principles, stakeholder engagement is important because the more people who input into the plan, the better the contents will be. Stakeholders often bring a new idea that you may not have thought about. If you consult many stakeholders, it is also more likely that your plan will align with other internal and external processes. For example, you might find that some stakeholders you consult will mention a biodiversity plan that you weren't aware of. You can then make sure the main elements of the biodiversity plan are included in your climate change response plan. Stakeholder engagement, therefore, is not only a legislative requirement, but it can also improve the content of your plan with new ideas and ensure that linkages with other processes are made. The first step in a stakeholder engagement process is to identify your stakeholders. This gives you a clearer understanding of who you need to engage with. You can start by grouping stakeholders into broad categories. This can help to ensure that you don't leave any key stakeholders out. 4 stakeholder categories have been identified in this program. The first is the local government category, which includes councillors, IDP officials, and different sector officials. The second category is the other governments. This category includes local, provincial, and national government bodies. The third is the non-government groups category, which should include various NGOs operating within the different sectors. The fourth category is the public. This category includes private companies, community organizations, and any active individuals. Once you have an idea of the different stakeholder categories, the next step is to try and identify specific people who you can communicate with directly as you carry the planning process forward. We're going to briefly look at the steps that can assist you with this process. When identifying local government stakeholders, you first need to identify who your climate change champions are. These are key municipal officials who will carry this process forward and assist you with the consolidation of information for the climate change response plan. You will also need to confirm who the different sector managers are in your municipality. These are important role players who you will need to work with very closely, especially in the IDP integration phase. Some of the sectors to consider include agriculture, biodiversity and environment, disaster management, human settlements, health, and water. When identifying other government stakeholders, it is important to consider relevant government departments at a provincial and at a national level, as well as government associations such as the South African Local Government Association, also known as SALGA. You also need to think of specific government sector bodies such as the Department of Water and Sanitation, Department of Water Affairs, Agriculture, and so forth. These stakeholders can either be at provincial government, at national government, as well as at local government level. When identifying non-government group stakeholders, it is useful to consider the different sectors that are impacted by climate change, and then try to identify NGOs which are actively working in these sectors in your area. Consider agriculture, for example. Are there any NGOs that are working with small-scale farmers in your area? Then you'd need to include those. You can then begin to do a similar assessment for the rest of the sectors. The final category is the public. These are stakeholders who may be interested in the process and would like to be kept informed or updated. Some of the stakeholders might even have a level of involvement in the sectors you are developing plans for. This group could include private companies operating in the area, different community organizations, and active individuals who might have an interest in the climate change adaptation and planning processes. An important process to follow as you identify stakeholders is to start compiling a stakeholder database containing all your stakeholder information and contact details. This makes it easy for you to track your stakeholders and also ensure that you have representation from different categories as well as sectors. A stakeholder database template can be downloaded from the Let's Respond Toolkit website. As you can see, this sheet has columns for stakeholder name, their surname, the position, type of stakeholder, as well as the contact details for all the identified stakeholders. You can customize this sheet by either adding other new columns or tabs based on the type of information you want to track. You can begin populating the information in your stakeholder database as you go along with the process of developing a climate change plan. For local and other government stakeholders, you can start by adding the details of specific individuals from various forums and meeting lists. You can then use a similar approach for non-government groups using meeting and forum registers as well as databases as a start. For the private sector, there may be a business environmental forum that operates in the area. You would then include those. Obtaining information for general public stakeholders may not be as easy as the other groups, and you might need to use more creative avenues, such as including community meeting attendees in your database or advertising for individuals to register on the project's database. An example is what eThekwini municipality did when they were developing their climate change strategy. The municipality published an advert in their local newspaper inviting stakeholders interested in the development of a climate change strategy for Durban to register on a project database. Stakeholders could register by either email or SMS. eThekwini municipality was then able to then update their database with interested public stakeholders. Once you've identified your stakeholders and begun populating your stakeholder database, the next step is to identify how you want to communicate with your stakeholders. It's important to keep in mind that different stakeholder groups need to be engaged with in different ways. You'll recall from earlier that we grouped our stakeholders into different categories of local government, other government, non-government groups, and public. You will need to identify the most effective ways of communicating with these different stakeholder groups. For example, you could use a presentation or rather a written report depending on who you're communicating with. For communicating with local governments, it may be best to do a presentation at existing forums or structures. You can summarize your climate change plan into a PowerPoint presentation and consider existing structures such as council, portfolio, or sector meetings, for example. There may be a regular municipal human settlements meeting and other internal municipal communication platforms that exist. For other government groups, a written report may be the best way to get your message across. You may consider distributing reports to existing structures such as SALGA and COCTA, or other intergovernmental platforms. For non-government groups, it may be more effective to communicate using a combination of presentations and reports depending on the stakeholder. For example, you may consider circulating reports to key civil society stakeholders presenting at community meetings for further input. Lastly, for communicating with the public, you may consider a range of communication tools. You could use presentations at public meetings or make use of the existing communication tools at municipalities such as newspapers or websites. You could also consider communicating more broadly through social media pages such as Facebook and Twitter, publishing requests for stakeholder comments in newspapers, or even start a competition with schools. We have now gone through the different types of stakeholders and the different ways you can communicate with your stakeholders. Keep in mind that the main aim of engaging stakeholders is so that your plan is reflective of what is happening in your area. Having the right stakeholders providing input into your plan is crucial, and will assist you with your climate change planning process. Also, raising awareness of climate change and the plan will also ensure greater support for the various climate change projects that you wish to implement in the future.